Now that we've established the core of our retirement plan, let's have a look at managing that retirement plan. The first thing that you've got to ask yourself is, where do you want to invest this? Are you going to look towards pensions, offshore tax efficient saving schemes, or platform accounts? Now let's look at pensions first. Now pensions are very good for one reason, and I think we all know what that is. And that's that they are very tax efficient, typically speaking. But they do come with a list of downsides. Now the first downside is they have a minimum retirement age, which means that your money is still locked up. Now, best case scenario, that's great for retirement savings because you don't need it till retirement. However, I'd always stress that having flexibility where you can is always beneficial because we can't predict the future. You may well find yourself in a situation where you do need this income earlier if you have a family emergency, or perhaps you find a really nice house you want to buy but you don't have it in your current accounts. Having money locked up in your pension that you can't access could prohibit you from making these choices. Now, as we're expats, there can be potential language barriers associated with pensions. If you're lucky and your pension providers have all of their documentation in English, that's not a problem for you. But if it's in a local language you don't speak, that will make administration that much harder. And depending on which country you are retiring in, you may be forced to hold your retirement accounts in the local currency. And if you are in a country, specifically across Africa, which has currencies which tend to have higher inflation than their Western counterparts, well, this means that the inflation can really erode the value of your investments, and potentially you might have differences in how you can withdraw the capital. Now, a lot of pension schemes around the world allow you to take it flexibly, similar to a bank account, but other countries will only allow you to take it as an annuity payment. And annuity payments are extremely inflexible, are based off interest rates, which even though we are going through a period of inflation right now, interest rates have risen, it can often work against you. And again, it's just one less choice that you have as an individual investor if you're forced into buying a specific type of investment product with your money in order to generate yourself an income. But the biggest reason I would warn expats specifically about looking at pensions is because pensions are tax efficient because they allow you to deduct your locally sourced income from your local tax bills. They don't allow you to deduct foreign taxable income from local tax bills. They allow you to deduct pension contributions from the tax bill of the country in which that pension is based in. As expats though, we tend to move around quite a lot. I've lived in 5 different countries over the last 10 years. And if I were to have started a pension scheme in my first country, and it was great, I was getting tax efficient savings, I could take that investment I made every year off my tax bill, brilliant. But the moment I moved to a new country, I cannot deduct contributions to that old pension from my new tax bill because it's in 2 different jurisdictions. Why is this a problem? Well, the problem is that if I wanted to continue investing in pensions, then I've got to start a new pension in a new country. So I've moved from country 1 to country 2. Country 1, I've got my old pension, I stop contributing to it because I lose the tax benefits. Country 2, open a new pension. Move again, country 3, open a new pension. By the time I get to retirement, I'll be in a situation where I have around 4 to 5 to 6 pensions in different countries. They'll often be in different languages, they'll have different laws on when I can take the money out, they'll have different currencies, they'll have different rules and regulations on how to invest, they'll have different rules and regulations on the age at which I can invest. And if you're moving around a lot and starting lots of different pension pots, those pension pots, as a consequence of that very fact, be smaller than you might envision a big retirement savings pot that you would imagine supporting your retirement plan. Which means that just because they're smaller, that doesn't mean they're any less difficult in order to source all of this information that is different between all of them that we just discussed. So what you are building towards here is a massive administrative nightmare of getting to your retirement and trying to find out where your pensions was in each different country and all of the different laws and languages, and then also getting those pension documents translated. As expats, it's quite hard to justify increasing that burden towards yourself. And I always stress that it's much easier to have all of your investments, especially retirement investments, managed in at least at the most 1 or 2 different places. However, if you know you're going to stay in the country and the pension laws in that country aren't particularly cumbersome, it's not the worst option either. But expats, I would always suggest, be quite aware of the extra burdens facing them when it comes to this. Now, the second option you might have, often the most popular, is offshore tax-efficient saving schemes. Now, the reason that these are quite popular is because, like pensions, they are very tax-efficient. But unlike pensions, you don't have to create a new one every time you move from country to country. There isn't a lot of specifics you can tend to go into when it comes to offshore saving products, because by and large, which ones are available to you quite dependent on a number of factors. But typically, the main core aspects of these products is that they are tax efficient. They can be wrapped in a life assurance bond. Normally that is done to provide the tax efficiency. There can be a lock-in period, and a lock-in period is an amount of time that you need to remain invested in the product before you can take your capital out, though that doesn't always happen. It tends to be a minimum initial investment, and they tend to be the higher expense options, but that's more than justified by their tax efficient savings. Now, before we get on to the third option here, I do just want to have a brief little mention of double taxation agreements. And this really kind of applies mostly towards pensions. Double taxation agreements are agreements between two different countries so that you're not going to pay tax in two different countries. Now, why this is applicable specifically if we look at pensions is because when pensions pay out, that tax is treated as income tax. The money you've put into it has been taken off your income tax liability at the outset, but at the end of that life frame, when you take it out of that pension product, then it is time for it to be taxed. And the idea is that because you're in retirement, you will have a lower income and therefore the tax burden will be lower. It is still tax efficient. So let's suppose that I'm based in Nigeria and I have a pension over in Kenya. Now, when I take that money out of the Kenyan pension, when I get to retirement, I decide it's time to start living off my retirement savings, the Kenyan tax authorities will see that income coming out of the pension and say, well, that's a taxable event. We're going to charge you income tax on that. Fantastic. So that tax gets paid to the Kenyan tax authorities. But at the same time, Nigeria sees me having a load of unexplained income, which is also taxable from their perspective. And they go, okay, can you pay income tax on that withdrawal? So in this situation, your pension is being taxed by two tax authorities at a rate of income. If we're being honest with ourselves, it's unlikely that there's going to be much left over for you to actually live on. So a double taxation agreement stops this happening. This will be an agreement between two different countries for this exact type of circumstance. Now, there's no specific double taxation agreement which every country agrees to. It's something negotiated between two countries. So as expats, if you are looking to take out pensions or any kind of local tax efficient saving schemes, although there are very few available out there, it's always important to understand the tax treaties between where this pension is based, where you're likely to be taking the money out of. Now, double taxation agreements are quite common, but if you fall into the unexpected situation of taking money out of a pension located in a country while you're tax resident in another country and those two countries don't have such an agreement, it's going to massively harm your financial security over time. So it's always best to check before looking at these products. So with that note on double taxation agreements, let's move on to our third option, platform accounts. Now, platform accounts tend to be the lowest cost investment accounts, but they're not very tax efficient. Typically, you will pay tax in your local country of residency according to the tax laws there. Now, the benefits of them is that they tend to be the cheapest option. They tend to be internationally portable, and most solutions are in English, which is quite good for expats. Really, I tend to think that expats should look between offshore tax efficient saving schemes and platforms as their choice. Because really the two differences is that offshore tax efficient investment saving schemes tend to be a little bit more costly, but have that tax efficiency which can really save you money and more than overcome the initial cost of them. And on the other hand, the platform accounts tend to be a little bit cheaper, so that tends to be the weighing of options. Pensions are just so inflexible, and with the restrictions on expats not being able to have one pension and have it for the rest of their life if they move around, it's not tends to be an option that we look at, but we can. So now we've understood where we're going to put this money, let's have a talk about how we manage risk across our retirement life cycle. The first thing to understand about risk is that risk is another word for unpredictability or volatility of investments. Now, as we increase risk or unpredictability, the short-term price becomes a lot less predictable and will go up and down and up and down in terms of value. So high-risk stocks tend to jump up quite a lot, whereas if we look at the case of a lower risk asset such as bonds, they tend to move up much less over a short to medium term. So why would anyone invest in a more risky asset? Well, the reason is that there is a general understanding, which is as we increase risk, while we are increasing short-term unpredictability of value, we are increasing our long-term expected potential gains. So the higher risk portfolio we have, although it's never guaranteed, we are likely to experience more growth over the long term. Which means that while you are working, before retirement, risk is fantastic because you don't care about short-term unpredictability when it comes to your retirement savings because you're not taking them out of your retirement pot. You're not taking them out if you're, let's say you're in your 40s and you're retiring at 55, you don't care if they're going up and down like crazy in the short term because you're taking them out in 15 years' time. The number that shows your balance at today, it's likely, but never guaranteed, to be a lot higher in 15 years' time. However, when we get closer to retirement, the same cannot be said. Because when we actually get inside retirement, we need this predictability because we need to take predictable payment distributions in order to fund our lifestyle. This retirement pot, that becomes our income. And if we have an unpredictable income, we cannot plan our retirement lifestyle. And also, we're just increasing the amount of stress on our life because you don't want to be in retirement constantly trying to work out what's going on in the stock market because that's going to depend on how much of a nice year you can have. So typically between 5 to 10 years away from retirement, it's recommended to start moving your high-risk investments to more medium and eventually lower risk investments so that while you are not getting that same long-term growth you do from the high-risk investments, you're getting predictable income. And that's why, for example, we see our benchmark rate of return drop from 7 to 4%, because we are sacrificing that 3%, or really 6%, because when the stock markets grow 10% every year, reducing it for safety. We're sacrificing that in favour of predictability, because the last thing you want to happen is there to be a huge stock market correction or, God forbid, crash a few days before you retire and you're all in high-risk tech stocks. Because then you have to put off retirement or essentially halve or even reduce to a third of the income you're expecting to still maintain a predictable lifestyle. So the next thing which often gets asked is when is the best time to start saving for retirement? Let's say you're planning to retire at 65. Should you start at the age of 35, 45 or 55? Well, the truth is you should really start as early as possible, because the earlier you start, it is exponentially easier to achieve your retirement targets. Compound growth is the idea that when your assets grow by a certain amount, in our benchmark rate of return we're using 7%. The first year they grow by 7%. So $100 will turn into $107. But it doesn't mean that every year they just grow by an additional $7, because you're also getting 7% of the growth. And that growth feeds into itself, and it means that it starts to compound and it starts to grow exponentially. And the first year of investment is always going to be the most important in terms of maximising long-term growth. Now, just to kind of explain that in a bit more detail, imagine you calculated a retirement shortfall of $1 million. Well, in order to achieve that, if we use a benchmark rate of return at 7%, if we have 30 years to achieve that, that will cost us $815. If we have 25 years to achieve that, that will cost us $1,220. If we have 20 years to achieve that goes to $1,900. 15, $3,100. And 10 years, we have over $5,700 required. Essentially, every 10 years you wait until you start saving, you double the amount, or more than double the amount, of monthly contributions you need in order to hit the same figure. And if we look at the 10% figures, that's even higher. To achieve $1 million, you'd only need to invest upwards of $439 per month over 30 years, or $747 over 25, over $1,300 over 20, $2,300 upwards over 15, and $4,800 over 10. So I always encourage people, the earlier you can start, the easier it's going to be in order to secure your retirement. Just a few key points of this presentation. The first step is to understand your goals and then convert those goals into financial targets, calculating your retirement shortfall and then creating a plan to meet that shortfall. Then understand where you want to invest the assets, whether it be in pensions, offshore tax-efficient saving schemes, or platform accounts. Start as early as possible to make it that much easier for you to achieve your goals, and reduce your investment risk as you get closer to retirement, because we don't value short-term predictability of assets at the start of our retirement planning process, but we do as we enter retirement, and that income supports our lifestyle. So if you're watching the video and you'd like a bit of extra help in order to plan for your retirement, or any area of financial advice you may need, please click the link in the description to sign up for a complimentary consultation with a Blacktower advisor.